and thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Commercial Cliff Notes. I'm KJ Wingert.
And I'm Jennifer Rose Bass with Century 21 ProLink and Property Pros Group.
Okay, today we get to talk about earnest money. So there's a lot of questions. I think people understand the concept of earnest money, but understanding and how much and when and if I get it back and all that good stuff. So Jen, really tell us what is earnest money? Let's start with that.
So it's basically a good faith deposit. It's kind of proving your seriousness to purchase the property. A lot of people equate earnest money, the higher the earnest money, the more serious you are. And while I do think that is true, I also think you need, if we're representing the buyer, we need to be conscious of those funds and where else could that money be used at the time.
Good point. So we're kind of in this super competitive space right now. How do you think earnest money affects a deal when you're looking at multiple offers on the table?
I think it affects a deal a lot. So especially in a competitive situation like KJ said, the higher the earnest money can translate to the seller how serious that buyer is.
Okay, so what's the typical, is there a percentage that, this is what we should be putting down? How do we know how much to put down?
Well, I like to use the percentage rule, but the percentage rule comes down to also how much cash the buyer has. If you're financing this, you might not have a lot of cash in the bank. So you have to, kind of balance those things out. But typically I say 3 to 6% is a good rule of thumb.
And when do you need the earnest money? So we're writing this offer and we say, this is what we're going to put down for earnest money. Do I give you the check right then?
In a competitive situation, ideally you would get the check then.
Okay.
However, because commercial is a lot of negotiation, you technically don't need the earnest money until there is an accepted offer. So that means both parties sign.
Okay. And we're in Iowa, but is that different in Nebraska, South Dakota?
It's wonderfully different. South Dakota is the shortest. You have 2 business days. Nebraska, you have 3 business days. In Iowa, you have 5 business days. And your agent will help you remember that because that's one of the things on our checklist that we've got to have.
All right. And then I'm assuming the earnest money goes towards something, correct?
It does. It goes towards your purchase, and it can be in the form of cash or check. Typically, the earnest money stays with the listing agent's brokerage, and it goes into a trust account because there are specific rules around what we can and can't do with that earnest money, and it does go towards your purchase in the end.
Great. And then say we have a deal that maybe doesn't go through, which is sad for everybody, but what happens to earnest money if a deal falls through?
You have to read the fine print in your purchase agreement. Typically, if it's at no fault to either buyer or seller, it's an inspection thing, maybe financing didn't come through, typically the earnest money goes back to the buyer. However, if the buyer is at default and didn't do what they needed to do to satisfy that purchase, the seller can keep that. And some sellers in this competitive market, some sellers will actually counter non-refundable earnest money. So maybe they'll accept the price you offer, but they'll say non-refundable earnest money. So it's kind of it's a way in the seller's mind to pay for that time the listing is off market.
Interesting. Very good. Well, thank you so much for all your answers here. We hope you learned a little bit today about earnest money. Join us back again sometime.